my cellar. I find out that I'm not the only fan of BattleBots. I've had a couple of other people claim that they or admit to liking it too. I watched a few of the. They're in some kind of tournament thing now prior to the season starting, so it was fun. Anyway, as of this moment, I'm trying to create a so-called immortal big bad evil guy, which has dungeons in different locations of Faerun that have clones of himself in them, waiting to become alive whenever the BBEG dies. I've thought of him also being a lich, and he's trying to find a way to actually beat death. Well, okay, so you're torn. Is he this? Is he that? Okay, I understand. Is he this? Is he that? Well, I can't be a lich and have extras waiting around to pop up. You can't, I would never allow a lich to clone itself. Now, whether or not I might allow simulacra of some sort to be there, that's a real deep delve into a campaign and how it run. So how you're going to handle something like your big bad evil guy. The way I handled it with Qualish was and Kellner was that they had one-way teleport areas, devices, a key of some sort, just gone somewhere else. So they were able to stay ahead until they were finally tracked down and cornered, so to speak. You can't. I wouldn't allow a lich to clone himself because he's already unnaturally alive, having extended his lifespan all this extra time. No, that's you can't have six other almost rotting bodies stashed somewhere. But then that's just my opinion. I really dig the roll to hit mechanics for Magic. Sorry. Well, that's fine if you like to use them. That's fine. Where would you apply them? Magic missile. Well, that hits where your finger points. So I give you like a 90% chance of hitting whatever you pointed at, or more, 95 if you've done it before. And again, depending upon the circumstances and the hurly-burly of what's going on around, etc. I don't think you roll to hit when you're letting go a stinking cloud or a horde of locusts or shooting at something with a fireball, because you only got to get within about 60 feet and you got them. So you get your game, you play your way. That's the nature of this beast. You play the way you like. Funnels. Yeah, I like the idea of the funnel. It doesn't work as well for OD&D as it does for DCC, which is set up for them. But I think they're great fun. Reminds me of tournaments that we used to run at Gen Con, where we went through player characters like Kleenex. That was the whole point. You died fun. Everybody had a good laugh. The peanut gallery was amused. Good times. And creating a background is writing one up. Well, yeah, that's in my eyes, that's the ideal. You write up this first level of wherever they're going to go to start a new campaign, and you write up all the background about the big bad evil guy, or the twisted this, or the demented that, or whatever. Right there, only where it starts, a wealth of rumors, and then ideally the campaign will be fleshed out by the players who'll go this way and that. And somebody else in here asked about sandboxing, and I'll deal with it, so I'll address that again. What I like is your clarification on racism in TSR and with Gary. You were there, you would know. I see so many who want to badly to label Gary or TSR some bastion of racism, when all it was a company in the mid-'70s. Society's evolved, and with its ideas, attitudes, and what's considered okay changes. That idea and understanding is lost on most today. Now I'm going to go on to this second one, and then I'm going to clarify. Next person says, I'd caution going too far and trying to defend Gary as just a sign of the times, because I've spoken to more than one person who was there, and you won't like some of the awful things he did say to and about people, not racism per se, but sexism and anti-Semitism. Things that weren't acceptable even for the 70s. Best leave the lid to that can covered. Let's just say we shouldn't be deifying or glorifying anyone. All right. Now, what I've said in the past several times is that I never heard him mutter anything racist or use a racist comment. I'm pretty sure I didn't say anything about sexism. Gary and Brian were of the opinion that no female skeletal array was capable of lifting or doing physical feats that a male skeletal array was capable of. And they did all the things about max weight a woman could lift and or female could lift, and yeah, that was a bunch of crap. But that wasn't racism, like I said. Now, anti-Semitism I find a little surprising. Not a lot, a little. But I never, ever heard anything anti-Semitic, and I never heard anything racist. What went on afterwards, some of the crap he wrote in that online forum were heinous ideas. But that happened while he and I were estranged. I wasn't even aware of them until after the fact, well after the fact. And then by that time, we had almost reconciled. And so I'm dealing with, oh, Jesus, I read all this stuff over here. And now we're going to, be friends again. And, yeah, he said some pretty weird shit. He subscribed to a principle or a theory or something that has since been debunked. But again, Gary is a child of his times, and there's people that believe Nostradamus was a genius. I'm not one of them. There's people that think Edgar Cayce was a clairvoyant. Well, I'm not one of them. He said what he said after the fact, and I've always stated, I never heard. And now we're not going to deal with this topic anymore. And I'll just ignore comments following up on it. I'm not, all right, and then we have another follow. I'm not putting the man on a pedestal, however, saying that in 78 things were more accepted than now. Yee, now we're getting into some dicey positioning here. Very dicey. For instance, my grandfather-in-law, so you can, he was retired from the factory when I married his granddaughter, who he and his wife had raised, essentially, instead of... Anyway, he used the N-word frequently without any malice in it that I ever detected. It was just a word used to denote a person of color. Now, the origins of that particular word are a worthless person. So therefore, I have read older stuff that identifies by color a white N, a red N, a black N. Okay. He didn't mean anything by it. I don't know if there are guys in the foundry, whether black guys working in the foundry with him or not. So yeah, that points to the generational use of words. Doesn't make them any less hurtful. It's just that some people that used them literally didn't know any better. And the term that was considered correct then is now frowned upon. Negro is not frowned upon. I don't know don't know where that's acceptable to use, or whether it's still a scientific term to identify the races. I don't know. So, saying stuff, there were things said that were not kosher even at the time. I do not agree with the things that used to be accepted. It's just the fact they were. Well, yeah, if you don't tell somebody, hey, you're doing something wrong, they don't know they were doing something wrong. You're saying something hateful, you don't know they're. But his sexist stuff, yeah, that was pretty. He was pretty much a sexist pig in that regard. I can't justify that. Another comment. The unfortunate thing is that when everything is racist, nothing is. Good point. Like I said before, we never ever saw orcs as this group or goblins as that group. Or that's an enormous load of hog shit. And speaking of hog shit, we're going to deal with some more of that later on. That was responded to. Good thing that's not having then, isn't it? And lucky for us, we have defined meanings of that word so we can tell what is and what isn't. Yeah. It's a fact that, and you go to any con anywhere, and you will see it's a fact that it's a very small percentage of persons of color that play role-playing. It's pretty much a white male, but less male than it used to be. It's pretty much a white thing, and that's a shame, because it could be so much more. And I'm working on getting a program going through the local library that is especially appealing to basically trying to say, hey, role playing isn't just for white folks. Okay, I love the podcast. You always give me something to mull over. I'm an avid 2E player. DM is a version of my childhood. Okay, 2A is pretty much 1E. 2E is pretty much. My question is about sandbox play. I have my ever-evolving setting, which is set in a Greek-style culture with hints of old Egypt built in. I'm a firm believer in players building the realm in an indirect or direct way. I do this by my players saying, I want to play a priest who worships a god XYZ, and if it's not there, we build it together, but also through their group musings. They often voice hunches about what may happen, and sometimes I write it in, let them think they guessed right, and I just feel it's a good way to go. How did you write or alter games? Well, that's clever. Listen to them thinking what it might be, and then making them feel good when, yeah, it was that. Um, and I don't think that's any more deceptive than anything other deceit regularly practiced by DMs. We practice a number of conceits and deceits as we let them evolve the story while we, fiddle around with it on the edges, keep it on track. Or a track, anyway. Might not be the track we set out on. That's okay. Sandbox, I like Sandbox because I feel that a sandbox approach, more than one thing to do after you accomplish something, more than one option to what we do next, will keep the players much more enthused and active and engaged in the game. They will have made the decision where to go. If it doesn't turn out well, you didn't railroad them into it. A railroad game would go from point A to point B, point C. Okay. Those can be okay. The series of the three giant, G1, G2, G3, is fine because they were connected. It was a pursuit. Otherwise, let them go where they want. You throw out half a dozen, breadcrumbs. Well, you can't predict which one they're gonna go for. So sandboxes, I feel, should just only be gently nudged here and there by the DM and let them go where they may. Okay, we got a report from the school clubs. He obtained a scientific barbarian D2 death die during the week and brought it to our club session on Friday. Now, for those of you who don't know, the scientific D2 is heads I lived, tails I died. In one game, 2 players were in a bad way, battling some deep ones. It was in a Cthulhu-themed campaign, and they had gotten 2 failed death saves. I introduced the D2 death die and explained how this precision instrument could speed up our game and make the process of death dying much easier to understand. They loved it, all caps. And both of them died, but they happily drew up another persona and carried on undeterred. Funny coincidence you mentioned henbane. I'm currently reading a short book entitled An Insight into an Insane Asylum, which is late 19th century text written by an elderly minister after he was involuntarily committed by his family. Bummer. In it, he relates that they were injected with henbane as a means to calm and sedate them. And the berserkers ingested massive amounts to go out and get crazy. Oh, Jesus. Seems a little bit like they were creating return customers using such a substance. And just so I don't leave off without any question and on, and talking about the alignment, in the original days, did alignment shift based on character actions? I've always said to my players, you can be any alignment you wish, but if you act in a manner opposite of that perception, the opposite of that perception of you will slowly shift. For example, if you're a lawful good paladin who murder hobos on the way home, on the way from town to town, you're soon going to be excommunicated from your order and not perceived as lawful good, but perhaps chaotic good or even lawful evil. Have a great week. GameholeCon looks like it's going to be great. I follow Alex on Twitter to see his amazing collection of NuTSR. Yeah, Alex is a great guy. Great con. Can't wait. I have to wait. So I leave 6 days from when I'm making this. And that's why there will not be another one until 2 weeks. There will not be one next Saturday because I will be at Gamehole. And I don't do these up in advance because that's not the way I do these. I don't come in with an agenda. I just answer and comment on comments. Well, what I believe happened, the tales I've heard, was that if you did something bad and your very soul was hanging in the balance, then you had to go do something to atone. You had to get back in good, or if you changed and stayed that way, things were not going to go well for you for a while. There was going to be a rough patch, and generally the rough patch was rough enough that most players didn't want to mess with it. I believe that was the incentive and the cure in the early days. If you screw up, you're going to have to go on a quest or something really awful, perhaps by yourself, or you're going to shift over and things aren't going to work right for you, and you're going to be you could have a lot of minuses on your die rolls. If people start failing saving throws, they might look into why that might be. And as a response to that one, the creator of the D2 death die responds, "That makes my fusion-powered heart sing. Thank you for sharing that." All right. Next response, "I do not try to take anyone too much to task over alignment in the game. They're not making a good faith effort to hold their characters to decline. If they're making a good faith effort, then I'm happy. If there's any real question, then I do prefer to have that discussion away from the table." That's fine. I really think that's the best way to have it. You shouldn't show up the player playing that character. That's never good. That's not good for you. That's not good for the players. Not good for the rest of the group. I definitely think, at least in the beginning. Now, if the player doesn't fall in line, well, then it may become more public when they can't make a saving throw to save their life, literally. Funny though, and then in the same week we were talking about Doug Swegman's presentation of the single class Bard from Strategic Review, number 6. In that same issue is an article on alignment written by Gary. It definitely keeps the same distinctions found elsewhere for the sake of gameplay. I typically follow those divisions, although my own literary influences on Law and Chaos and RPGs come from Zelazny and Moorcock, and that's great. And if that's the way you want to run your perceptions, you should. You should. And if your players are trying to get a handle on what's going on, give them the author's names. Hey, go pick up a book of theirs and you'll get an idea where we're at. Nothing like reading a Vance book to figure out why magic works the way it does in that game system. That said, I think you're giving neutrality too much wiggle room. Personally, I think to maintain neutrality it takes far more effort than giving in to either law or chaos. Well, we'll disagree on that one forever. We used to have a metric about law and chaos and neutral. Lawful did not mean good. Lawful does not mean good. Lawful means that the character or the monster or whatever will respond in a predictable way but for cultural reasons, whatever, this is what they'll do. That's lawful. Chaotic is an elf. Not the damn Tolkien elves from the movies, but the capricious sprite. Chaotic. You're not sure how they're going to react. All right? That's what those two meant in the very beginning. Lawful meant you could count on a certain response given a certain stimulus. you could expect a certain response given a similar provocation. The meanings, the original meanings, the original nuanced definitions of those words has become blurry. Squirrels in the yard are chaotic. You never know how they're going to react. One day they'll get up within 3 feet of you, stand up and look at you. Next time you walk out the door 40 feet away, they take off. You never know how they're going to react. Now, the rabbit we have that comes into our yard, that's been coming in for a couple of years, we know how it's going to react when we walk out into the back. And it does the same thing every time. It looks at it and goes, yeah, okay. Birds, chaotic. Neutral means that you'll always look out for yourself first. Everything you do will be nuanced through that prism. What's in this for me? How does this best serve me? They're going to react in the way that best suits themselves, that preserves themselves. Aside from being evil or good, what best suits myself? What do I best benefit from? What action will do me the most good? All right. Let's see. Let's go on. I rather like the way Gary put in his Meaning of Law and Chaos and Dungeons and Dragons and their relationship to good and evil article, starting on page 3 of the Strategic Review, number 6. Alignment does not preclude actions which typify a different alignment, but such actions will necessarily affect the position of the character performing them, and the class or the alignment of the character in question can change due to such actions, unless counter deeds are performed to balance things. Well, I got no problem with part of that. I don't see you doing something different that's going to change your class. Fighters don't become thieves, thieves don't become fighters, magic users don't become clerics. That said, the good, the bad, the good and the evil, yeah, those need checks and balances. If there's a role-playing game I find quite fascinating called Mouse Guard, and in Mouse Guard you don't get experience points or go up levels or anything. But if you to get healed or to whatever, you have to follow a code. You have a personal ethic. I will always meet danger at the point of my sword. And so if that's the way you behave, and when faced with something new or dangerous, you do it bravely at your sword, well then you have, I can't remember the term they use exactly, but you have been true to yourself. So if you got a little scratched up on that last mission, having been true to yourself, you get better, quicker, healed. Different system, same principles. I'm true to myself. I met that danger on the point of my sword. All right, let's see. So for me, balance isn't something that works itself out in the end. It's something the adherent has to continue to work at to maintain the balance. Rather than always making the lawful or chaotic choice, the neutral must make the choice that establishes and preserves the balance, which and which is constantly in flux, so it's always a moving target. You handle alignment however you want. I don't run a campaign anymore. The games I run at cons and the games I run online don't take alignment into effect at all. So, whatever floats your boat. Well, my preferred style is pretty loosey goosey. I don't let paladins gouge out the eyes of babies, or something like that. No, absolutely. If they did, they would probably be struck down by their deity. They did something so heinous to their principles, their deity would probably hit them with a blue bolt right then and there, turn them to stone. Might. I've done similar things before, over the years. Okay, so last alignment question for me for a while at least. In the Dragon number 9, Gary wrote an article entitled Varied Player Character and Non-Player Character Alignment in the Dungeons & Dragons Campaign, starting on page 5. In that article, Gary presents the ideas of allowing new characters to represent their alignment falsely until they become powerful enough to resist being immediately destroyed by the other player characters. Pragmatically, that does seem like a good way to keep a low-level character alive in the presence of a party of PCs of diametrically opposed alignments, however. Still seems like that player should have to perform some atonement to their deity or organized principle for concealing their true nature. Well, see, if you'd been neutral, it wouldn't make any difference. And that's fine if that's the way you want to play it. I'm not critical. I'm just saying I wouldn't pay nearly so much attention to the alignments. There's so many other things. Maybe evil characters should get a bonus. I think it's wise that everybody's the languages. Oh God, the languages. All right, I can buy into common. I can buy into a racial or species language, orc speaking orcish, and goblin speaking goblinoid, or whatever. I can have different racial languages amongst humans. Those are generally geographically based. I don't think there's an evil language. I don't think there's a good language. Languages are the only language that the only language thing I could see is the thieves' cant. All right, and because that has an actual historical background, and it's been glossed over because they became the rogue. So I guess it's the rogues' cant now. Now, I got 2 more things to deal with. And I know we've been going a while already. Those of you who read the comments at the end saw a comment by somebody who identifies themselves by a series of letters and numbers. And I'm certain it is from one of the crew of the dumpster fire that was the NuTSR. First thing is giveaway is that whoever it is can't spell for shit. It can't complete a sentence. And that's been consistent throughout. Now, whether it's well, let's see, what are they? Could be Hovermail, could be Dinehart, could be Johnson, could be McArt, And it could be Lanasa. They all live out of the same snake pit. And let's see, can I talk about the early days and how Gary Gygax really hated you and fired you? And they claim Jeff Leeson to be a good friend, having confirmed that I were fired. And only after Gary died, you stepped in like a leech, like a grifter, and milk fellow grifter Luke, who hated his father. Well, let's start right there. Number one, I've talked to Jeff Leeson. He wasn't even aware that he was being used, his name was being used in vain, and he was being drug into what could easily be libelous statements. Of course, the person putting this is such a stinking foul coward that they won't identify themselves. They hide behind a fake ID, a fake identity on Facebook. So, if I block that one, they'll just make up a new one. And that, let's see, I stepped in like a leech and a grifter. Okay. Now you both use the man's name, and both of you turned your back on the true TSR and the man who put his money to get TSR back. Now, if that's if that's a reference to Justin Lanasa, who's the person behind the museum and all that, his grandiose, ludicrous claims of being a savior arriving back to bring back TSR to its former glory are just that, ludicrous and absurd, especially when there are recordings of him saying that his whole idea was to snatch up some trademarks, sit on them until Watsy paid him off. I know somebody has that on a recording from a conversation that they were part of. I've turned my back on the true TSR. True TSR died when he who shall not be named took it over. Yeah, and it's about the man who put his money to get TSR back. I don't know what money. Whatever it wasn't well spent. There's a bankruptcy proceeding going on where, from what I'm told, there have been several indications that his attempts to hide assets have been foiled, and he's circling the drain. But he has his flunkies. So don't just remove my comment. Be a man. Talk about all this. Come on, stop hiding. Do a video. Well, here I am. It says, I bet you won't. Here I am. I didn't hate Gary. We were accidentally estranged because when I had my brew up with the Blooms, I had no idea that Gary had already been neutered and no longer had enough stock to do anything about it. And so I left. And years later, after I found out, when all this stuff came out, we reconciled at one of the Lake Geneva game conventions that the Trolls were running in Lake Geneva on Gary's behalf for Gary. So I certainly never hated the man. I felt, for those years of estrangement, I felt betrayed. But I didn't know the circumstances, and when I found out, it was like, oh man, was I wrong? And we talked about it, Gary and I did. So it was all cool. Now, excuse me, that's my bullshit detector going off. There are a ton of responses, and I'm just going to hit on a couple of them. These are all responses to this claim. Mock the true savior of TSR? What? Justin, don't you have more important things to worry about, like losing everything in the stupidest lawsuit known to man? Next comment. How are your efforts in saving TSR going, eh? Must be a Canadian. Funny, Justin, I was at the funeral. Luke had nothing but good memories of his father in his eulogy. Where were you? Both Tim and Luke have been decent throughout this whole fiasco. You would have a better chance of getting Tim to make such admissions in a video if you were to make him post to it admitting what a poor business and human being you are. How many more people will you hurt and drag down with you? Even now, while the creditors and lawyers are circling and the specter of jail time haunting you, you would rather spend time lashing out at others than trying to deal with looking after your own family by not running off at the mouth? Is your ego that important? More than the welfare of your family? Well, if it's that precious, it must be fragile. Next one, shouldn't you be off trying to hide assets from bankruptcy? When a true savior of TSR ever appears, we'll ask them what they think. I haven't seen one appear in the last 5 years, that's for sure. I'm certainly glad you're using your time productively, though. Attacking a legend with unfounded and unsubstantiated allegations on his own YouTube channel comments, populated by his most hardcore fans, is certainly a constructive use of your resources. Certainly more useful to your public image than showing up several flailing lawsuit cases or something, or producing an RPG product that someone might ever actually give two craps about. And another comment, great job. So then we get one that says, for the record, this is not Justin Lanassa. He has friends, real ones who stand by him. So that Drew, real friends would have told him to stop behaving in a way that risks his business and reputation. Real friends would have told him to stop harassing the witnesses to court cases against him. Real friends would have told him to consider what his behavior is doing to his family's financial situation. He strikes me as a guy who would have benefited from having real friends instead of what he has now. Another comment, so Hovermail, Dienhard, Johnson, and McCart. The list isn't a long one, or at all prestigious. Those are his friends. Guy currently losing all his money on a foolish lawsuit he was always unprepared for, says, what about old-timers with actual credentials again? So that's it. He's going down. At the very least, he's going to be broke. I'm not going to address his libels anymore, unless he comes up with a new one. And again, I don't know that it was Lanassa writing this. I'm certain it was one of the 4 or 5 that I mentioned, his circle of cronies. Now, for something different, not mustard. Let's talk about Kickstarter. What is Kickstarter? When it comes down to it, Kickstarter is a game designer telling you, I have this great game that plays thus and such and has all these spiffy pieces, and et cetera, and all I need is money to put it together. So if you'd like one, send me, da-da-da-da. When I get enough money, I'll have it all put together, and you'll get a game. It is not buying a game. You do not buy a game when you pledge on Kickstarter. You buy into the designer's dream and game or product, whatever the product is, and you hope you aren't being sold a bill of goods. Exploding Kittens is the greatest example of a bill of goods. They sold $7-8 million of a Kickstarter on a game that you can't play more than about 3 times. Wow. Good for them. Now, if those people put one out again, do you think they would do that kind of money? No. Because they're beautifully produced, wonderful commercials about what a wonderful game it is were obviously hype and hot air. If you can't replay the game more than 3 times, it's not a very good game. Period. So those people sold all those people that gave those millions a bill of goods. All right? Take a game I bought several years ago. I didn't buy. I used that term and I'm wrong. A game that I pledged several years ago called The War of Kings. Lovely game. Lovely pieces. Great heft. Good rules. I believe their hype. I said, okay, I think you got a good idea here. Sent my money. Got the game. Wow. Loved it. Another Kickstarter I did was The Giant Ogre. Steve Jackson Games. Yeah, Steve Jackson Games came out and decided to do a giant version of Ogre. And I mean giant. Huge. Takes up way too much room under my pool table. I bought into that. It was $100, and that was several years ago. I bought into that, and sure enough, Steve Jackson Games produced it. I got it. I loved it. Now, I was buying in to a Kickstarter by a known producer. There have been individuals, Ken Whitman comes to mind, who have found new people to dupe more than once and not come through on a promised product. Now, to be fair, that's not everyone. I bought a card game, not knowing it was from him. I bought in on a card game, and it was good. Good game. Nice cards. No problem. But you're not buying a game. You're putting in an order for one if it gets made. You're helping this guy make it. You're buying a one-game share of stock. If the company goes belly up, you don't get your game. If the company works out, you get your game. You can't go and sue them if they fail. Now, there have been notorious instances of things being horrendously late. The Dungeon Hobby Shop, whatever, would have died. It funded and it fell on its ass, and the people putting it together were inept and unable to do it. And now the trolls have stepped in from Troll Lord Games, and they helped get it out. So all those people didn't get screwed. Do you suppose the persons that put that together the first time will get anybody to buy in on the next one? No. Kickstarter is not buying a game, even though I stumble on the pronunciation and the wording too. You are optimistically, you're buying a game. You're an optimist. He's going to break that game, and I've got one coming. Okay, that's what you're doing. You're buying a future product if it's made. You're saying to the maker, the potential maker, I believe in what you're doing. Here's some of my money to help you do it. But it's not like going down to your friendly local game store and plunking down $95 for the latest Warhammer iteration. I ever knew anybody who would have done that. But it's the example is valid. You're not, all right. Now, what makes a good person a Kickstarter? Can a good Kickstarter be late? Yes. Shit happens. A good Kickstarter keeps his pledges informed. Email after email after email after email. Steve Jackson Games sent over 100 emails out to all the pledges over the course of the game, and then all the stretch goals and all the extra minis and all that stuff. Over 100. If the person keeps you informed of what's going on and then delivers, your faith was rewarded. If a person does a couple three on time, has trouble one time, keeps you informed, delivers, go for the next one. Or not. All right. Now, the problem with this is whether the game is good enough is so subjective. That's where clever reading of what they say it is comes in. The War of Kings game that I have is very playable, very replayable, and it came in good pieces, good components, good stuff. Now I've got other games and I've seen other games that I wouldn't play more than twice. Play them once, oh, are you kidding me? Play it again. Yeah, it really is that bad, and then quit. But Kickstarter is not walking in and plunking your money down on the counter. Kickstarter is saying, okay, I believe in your dream. Here's a little bit to help you get there. Don't, if you see something, a Kickstarter that you're intrigued by, then look that author up. If they've done it before, there'll be traces on the internet of tracks of what they've done. If it's their first one, then you got to take a leap of faith or not. But Kickstarter is not buying a game. You get one when it all works out. But if it doesn't, you're left holding an empty sack. And businesses fail every day. Don't be harsh on somebody whose Kickstarter didn't fund. Be harsh on somebody who funded 2 Kickstarters and didn't deliver on either one. And with that, a reminder that I will be away next week at Gamehole. If anybody there listening, it looks like I got crap all over my shirt. If anybody watching this is going to be there, come look me up. That shouldn't be too hard to find. I'm loud. I'm running 4 games, I guess. And I may be at one or more booths of friends for a little while. I don't know yet. But by all means, if you get a chance to come to Gamehole, come. It's a great con. And if you didn't make this one, well, I'll be back to tell you how good it was and what you missed, and then you can make the next one. And until then, Dodada Gobi. Hello, and welcome to my Cellar.
The Curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the Curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the Curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller. The curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. DSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree.
High as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Curmudgeon.